Okay, hi everybody. I would like to welcome you to our second podcast, JoyData Podcast, and today's guest is Aleksejs Plotnikovs, and he's a colleague of Alexander Borek, who we had in our first session. And today's topic that we will be talking about is educating leaders, and what we want to shed is more light into what data masterclass is and what data leaders should be considering when they would like to educate and move towards the roles of today's. So welcome, Aleksejs, and maybe could you introduce yourself a little bit and tell about your experience to our listeners?
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for having me here. It's exciting. It's my first time actually in your beautiful premises as well. So who is Aleksejs? Aleksejs, before the Data Masterclass, was spending all his life in data, starting way back with some Nokia stuff and then moving to Oracle Tech when it was cool. I had a consulting experience with Accenture, but my main track was with Microsoft, where I spent 16 years as data and AI leader for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And that was a big journey, a lot of learnings. And that also took me to the Data Masterclass.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And from a Data Masterclass as such, how do you see, this program evolving? What is your role? Can you tell us a little bit more specific what you are most responsible?
Sure. So at Data Masterclass, we are two partners, Alex and Aleksejs, and our focus right now is to create really bigger movement with AI leadership, data and AI leadership as it evolves. So we are creating a new program for aspiring leaders, and that touches every leader today, whenever you're a business leader or technology leader, or even data and AI leader. But there are so many things which changes with AI. But we believe that all the leaders of the world, they need to get that agentic boost. And that's why we are focusing on rolling this new program today across the world. It's not geographically bound. It will be available in many cohorts across the world. So this is one of my prime focuses, along with opening more of the Data Masterclass chapters, like here in Prague.
Yep, that's what I wanted to add. We are part of the Data Masterclass as well, opening the chapter class, and we are running as well JoyData events and Data Masterclass events. So stay tuned because we will be announcing several interesting events where various leaders can come to an interesting education and sharing of their experiences with their peers. So let's dig into the topic, the leader education. When I talk to various data and AI leaders, they are always cognizant of various topics that they need to either upskill or they need to see how other peers are doing it or other companies are doing it. So they are very eager to see and share this experience. And one of the topics which I get asked really a lot, and this is as well topic closest to my heart, is the data strategy and kind of the connection between the data and AI initiatives, data and AI strategy, data and transformation towards connecting the technical part with the business goals. And this is usually where, this leader is meeting as well the board members, the various business members. And I think, and I know your program, as you mentioned, is focused on everybody, not just the technical roles, on the business roles. We started as well more from the technical roles, coming closer to business, but as well I get into many discussions where business wants to come closer to technology. And therefore, I think we have a common goal in here. And how do you see, because in the past it was really a lot of the role of the CDO or head of data and AI, but it can be as well other roles. How do you see how these roles are changing, what is staying, what is disappearing?
That's a great question. And I think what we see today is this change from data before being very in IT. So a majority of the data organizations somehow were belonging to the IT world. And it was always difficult to cross from the IT world to the business side of the house. And with AI, it's much easier because with AI, you can have some of the AI products, some of the capabilities which are more addressable directly on the business level. So that's why we see more business leaders being directly interested in AI. They're becoming the people who buy also these capabilities. And often they not aware or even intentionally ignore like what's going on in the data side of the house. They just go after AI. And this on one side, it facilitates the AI adoption across the companies, but that creates this even bigger gap, between business leaders buying an AI solutions and really betting on them, but not aware of like what groundwork needs to be done or what additional things should happen, with the infrastructure, with the data, with the self-service capabilities in the company before AI will thrive. And, I think for many data leaders, this is the opportunity, to kind of close that gap, to reposition them not as a data leaders only, but also as a true AI leaders, which focuses on the value of that enterprise work.
Yeah, and I know that you are consulting various clients, on this approach. Do you have any kind of interesting story or tip that you could give to our listeners? How the people are tackling this? Because of course, in a certain way, everybody knows, or at least is somehow feeling that they should do it. But do you have any kind of tips or kind of areas where you see how the leaders are actually starting with these programs, or what is the triggers? Or
Absolutely. I think the most powerful place where to start is to get the executive and the board to get that AI story heard at least, or see some of the things which could be done with AI. So we had this several times through the last year when we kicked off this conversation with the boards, with CEOs, showing them actually what AI can do, presenting, the use cases, showing a little bit of the hands-on experience as well. And even today, like next week, we are doing with one of our members, we're doing exactly this, we're taking CEO and the board members on the offsite, and we are working through what is AI opportunity in 2026. It's changed a lot. The company could really realize much stronger the AI, but they, I think, simply not aware. Right? And this awareness and this very ground level understanding of how big the shift is, how much today could be redesigned, the business workflows could be redesigned with agentic workflows, how much of the real value, in measurable value could be coming in because of that. I think this is what's missing today. And so we're empowering every data leader today, every data and AI leader to find that ability to tap into curiosity often of the CEO on the board and get them, on that hook, like, hey, do you really want to learn, like what's possible with your company? It's your company at the end. Yeah. So you have ability to drive it in a much stronger way.
And I think what you are kind of mentioning as well, this is exactly the board narrative, and I think many, especially the technical data leaders, they are struggling with kind of creating the proper narrative for the board. But I think it's a very interesting way how you said, to help maybe find the facilitator, and help to spark this interest, in the board and help to cover the message through or bring the message through.
Exactly. And at the end, this narrative is not complicated. Yeah. So you help to identify some big bets. So few strategic, like really few, not 10, maximum 3. Let's say 3 strategic capabilities which company can radically upgrade when we think about business in the agentic world. And this what makes, really high bets in terms of it touches the revenue, it touches significant business transformation. So there is a way how to frame it and how to measure it. But you also give more of that, long-hanging fruits, this self-service capabilities and productivity tools which are AI-based also into the company so that people feel it faster. So before you get that big bet, which may take you 6-8 months or more, you already have some immediate productivity solutions, which people also love, and they like it, and they feel then there is something going on in this company. So that's our kind of trick, of managing this on the one side very strategically, and on the other side also creating those immediate opportunities, which, all the leadership really loves.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the insight, and I think this is what the people are asking and wondering, how we could approach it, or maybe sometimes even doing. But they need, a reassurance or a confirmation that, hey, you are on a good way, on a good track. I think the major ones who are missing out are those who are kind of ignoring, or maybe sometimes I see they are, under the under the load of their kind of regular operational workload. So this is as well very important from my perspective to free up and find the space, exactly to find maybe a time to go for an offsite or to do a workshop, with the board members, because many times they are just under the load of their daily operational work.
You're touching very nice and very practical aspects. Nothing happens immediately or by the miracle. Even this offsite, which I'm just mentioning right now, as we're doing next week, the planning for this started back in February, right? So you have to account for this. But when you account for this and you start to make yourself prepared, then time flies.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, when I'm talking as well to the leaders, I think this strategic board narrative, it's something where it starts, where it sparks the ideas, but many times then they come and say, okay, we know we kind of spark the story, we spark the energy and the kind of wish to either make a strategic change or a more pragmatic low-hanging fruit change, but then they are, okay, how we should incorporate. Do you have any tips for the data leaders, what could be the good steps, how to start with the kind of agentic approach, and whether it's in a data or in a business space? I think it's both are very similar.
Yes, of course. We just held, by the way, last week an excellent session on this together with PwC on Data Masterclass Europe event in Berlin. But to mention maybe a few of those things which really works well, one was already mentioned, so having those big bets, the big bets which are measurable, which attains also to the real value of the company. Chatbot is not a big bet. So something which touches the revenue or touches some critical capabilities which are highly measurable. On the other hand, you also have to bring in those practical, ways of leaving AI and kind of having it helps, like this low-hanging self-service enablements, which many people are not aware of, even like they can do directly, with their company accounts. Many companies today already have Copilot installed almost by default, or they're buying, the cloud code and so on. So there is so much which could be achieved in that space, and kind of creating this productivity alignment between, hey, this is what you can do individually, this is what you could do as a team, and this is what you could do as an enterprise. This is already a lot of help, to kind of structure it. Like, where do we do what kind of investment? How exactly it helps people to be more productive, let's say. And then the one thing which also is very important, comparing with maybe some past good times with data, we used to have an investment which lasts, if not forever, then for a long time uninterrupted. When I look back years, when we had this foundational investments or platform investment, we would see, it's a rolling budget over, 12 months or 24 months and so on. It's much less of AI this way. So you have to reconfirm, right? When you get some investment secured, you have to reconfirm it all the time with the business. You have to kind of work, as we say, 3 quarters ahead. And your first quarter is very well defined. That's exactly what's on your deliverable list. Your second quarter is also relatively well defined, because that's somewhat still relates to your immediate deliverables. Your third quarter is already quite blurry, because in AI it's very much depends on what you have achieved in last 2. And your fourth quarter is basically just in planning space, in the vision space. But this is what happens today. So the speed of change, and how also not only what you do, but also how technology is changing around you. It's a reality of this, planning span, and like how do you go quarter after quarter.
Yeah, this brings me to one idea, because when I talk to various data leaders or AI leaders, they are talking as well, the technology is changing so fast. Maybe we do just like on smaller things, or how should we prepare, the data and AI architecture, towards what's coming ahead. And from my perspective, sometimes it can be valid in some kind of, either models or technology spaces, but from the fundamental concept and how the architecture looks like, it changes only in a smaller amount. So how do you see it?
It depends, honestly. I may come back to this in a second, but what we see today is a new paradigm. So you all know about this, buy or build, build or buy. There is a third component now for many companies who already put in some steps into AI. They basically say, buy or build or wait. And this wait because so many things being built by frontier models and so many things being, very rapidly included into, scale-up startups, but even by the big companies like Cloud or OpenAI. And so you sometimes have something which you build internally, and you was very proud of that as the internal productivity or new capability tool, but it's then being deployed on a production level by one of those big players. And so you kind of cut what you did and you redeploy it. So there is this architectural pattern, but where it helps, I think, a lot of people to decide is there is this very simple formula which was developed, I think, in the early age of AI, Gen AI, which says that if we look business across the business, 80% of the enterprise functions are very similar to each other. We all have a payroll, we all have a CRM, we have a customer service, so this is all very similar. And so that the software, which traditionally created, also is very similar. Different brands, but the nature of that function is very similar. So this 80% for AI is absolute commodity. So it's something which we will see, thriving through weeks and months of being, implemented, something very AI-driven, new, and totally covering this function. So when you look what remains in this 20% out of your 80 of commodity, you have about a 15% of your enterprise work, which is in the industry, right? So you may have industry solutions tailored for exactly where you are. If you're automotive, you have automotive solutions. If you are in manufacturing, you have some manufacturing software, manufacturing processes, whatsoever. So this is a bit harder, for AI kind of to look through. But it's also coming, right? And so all the vendors which exist in this space, they bring this knowledge. Also, they bring these AI capabilities into this. So you don't waste too much time on building, things in that space. It will also come up soon. So remaining 5% is exactly where you should focus from enterprise perspective and from data and AI leadership perspective, because that's those 5% which defines the unique competitive edge of a company. This is the company IP. This is what makes it competitive. This is what makes it unique. And so if you build your AI solutions in that space, then you're likely to have not only higher value of this, but also higher longevity, because that is where it stays. Nobody has built in that space because it's your space.
Yeah. No, very interesting point of view, and I exactly like looking at the architecture and patterns and where to invest. It definitely shed some light into that. Thanks a lot. I think the next topic I would like to touch, and I think you kind of already mentioned it, is the organization itself. Of course, we as leaders, data and AI leaders, have to transform ourselves, but we see as well many people around us need to transform, their skill sets. So where do you see what are the kind of things that were actually needed in the past, but are now disappearing or maybe changing? What is your kind of strong? Where do you see the strongest change? And I would say maybe focus on the data team. Could be like from engineering, analytics. Maybe we can as well mention business analysis, although it's not kind of pure data team, but it's what brings the requirements, in, and potentially other roles. So.
Yeah, this is a great question. What we see today is the change which happens because the work changes, right? So let me give you an example. One of our members, they introduced quite successfully talk-to-data capability. This chat with your data, talk to your data, which was eventually replacing some of the standard dashboards. And not only the standard dashboards, because also a lot of ad hoc requests, which the analytics team was before focusing on kind of building and so on. So as you see now this on a kind of bigger scale, from a balcony view, you see that the team of analysts, which was before occupied only by producing the dashboards, the demand is changes, right, for this. So they don't need that much time anymore to spend on dashboards. People are able to retrieve the data they need directly from the systems. And they are happy with this, and they don't ask for another dashboard. They kind of do it themselves fully in their own kind of channel and interface. So what happens in this space, right? So on one side, you have the business which consumes the data more in that self-service way, more productive, they can achieve more and faster. On the other hand, you kind of get puzzled, like, okay, but what's that evolution for the analysts, right? And what happened then is that you see, okay, you need to go in two different directions in a way. You're either becoming more technical because you need to create enablement for this, right? So all that self-service which is consumed by the business, it will only grow. The interest for having more data, better data, convert some businesses' processes will grow. So you have to shift some of the people in more of the technical enablement. Think about that AI engineer type of role. And then on the other hand, you have people who are absolutely could help on a more strategic analysis, on a faster, like when the company deploys new products, for example, on the market. No need to wait anymore for a month to get some statistics. You may have people which, from minute one of the product launch, already observing how it works. You also need to explore so much of the context. I think in data and AI world, the number one word for 2026 is the context, right? So how do you get that context from the business users, from everything which is operatable in the enterprise? This is also where the analysts are best suited. And so see now what I'm leading towards. It's not that we drastically redesign the organization or something, but because the nature of work is changing, so that the roles and the definition of who is doing what also shifts, right? And this is what we foresee today, that there will be, I think, gradually more kind of leaner roles, more connected roles, and they will be more focused on this end-to-end ability to understand what's the value we bring to the business, let's say, and how do we do full path on self-service and enablement for that.
Yeah. And maybe do you have any kind of tips how to approach this? Because, of course, we know the roles are changing, how the companies are actually tackling it. Do they do kind of people management, like review the skills or review the task, or what? Where you see how it's a good place to start, in redesigning these roles.
I know where it's wrong place to start, and we will be talking, by the way, here today on this. It's about seeing this as the organizational redesign. Like, okay, let's do another rework. That's not the way, because the purpose is not here. The purpose is to really find out what's valuable, how do we then follow that value, and create all the enablement which needs to happen with the people, right? And then you protect that space, giving people the right skills, technical skills to learn, the right connection within the company, the new opportunity to work on something which haven't worked before. So this is more of that leadership role exactly to enable and unblock it for your teams, right? And see who is really eager to learn. And, there might be people who will be not eager to learn. That's okay. You have to make then also a decision in that space. But I think this ability for leaders to, show that path very cleanly and clearly, and then have those critical conversations with people, like who is on that path, who wants to learn, create that space for them. And with the others, you have also the important conversation to help them to understand that the world is changing.
Yeah. I have actually a very good story, because this happened to me within our company. We are affected as well as a service provider. We have to start to provide the services in a different way, and especially in how much we leverage agents for coding and so on. And I was talking to one of our colleagues and kind of showing some of the ways, how this can happen and what we can do. And he was like, yeah, Jaro, look, if I see where is it going, I maybe don't want to be part of that, because the coding is the part that I liked, and this is somehow, being taken away from me. And I was very surprised, because, but it was a reaction, and I think people have these concerns, but then it was as well very interesting to see that it was not like, okay, so now you don't want to do it, you are crossed, you are out. But we continued the discussions. We had some additional sessions, maybe some hackathons, some kind of tryouts, like as well kind of sparking these ideas where to leverage it, giving the tools, giving the opportunities, the education. And this as well fundamentally changed, with such people, that they are now kind of more eager to see. And of course, that was the natural first reaction. but I think this is as well for us as leaders to work individually within those teams and within those roles and kind of see and explain, and kind of always when we turn it back towards, where are we going to work better or in a better way, so then it helped. And I think it was part of, we talked about it with Alex on our last podcast, was this pink world. So we don't want to see the world with AI as a black, that, machines will take over and nobody will have to work, but really in a way where we as leaders are responsible actually to bring the people along through this transformation. And
Absolutely. And I mean, nobody takes away the opportunity and the need for the build. What, even in your example, we see that the build is changing the way it's done. So people not many more time spending time on reviewing the code or writing the code manually, but as a function of the build. It's like what fundamental gap in today's functionality you are approaching with that build. This doesn't go away. So you could build much more. If you have a better knowledge also of what's needed in the business, you can build faster and for many more business problems. I think that's phenomenal, right? So even for professionals, just shifting this from like, hey, you work on one project for half a year, now you can do 100 projects in a half a year, and they equally valuable for the company. That's the shift. And on the other hand, democratizing this self-service with newest capabilities. Last week on a Data Masterclass Europe, I was asking the audience of 100+ people, I said, who of you tried Lovable? Or any of those solutions? There was maybe like 7 hands. It was shocking for me, because that's what the world goes for. And so every person who is in this transformation should have the first-hand experience with it.
Yeah. No, it's a very interesting point, and we touched it as well on our last session, that the leaders, it's not just like I will have a team who will do it, but the leaders should pull up their sleeves, try some of the things and then kind of bring the people along, because I think it shows how to say trust, that you are not just saying something but have no clue what it means, and on the other hand as well the kind of brings it together with the people and the change. And thank you very much for this part. That was more about the roles and the organization. And I would come to our closing part of our podcast. And this is when we talked about like visions, where we as leaders, where the teams are going to be. So how do you work with that, with data and AI leaders, how they should create this kind of vision, where to go, and how to actually work on themselves and improve and grow towards these new demanding times?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think it's a question which many people in the leadership role ask themselves. Interestingly enough, this question also comes from all the other corners as well. We see it from the enterprises, from people who actually hiring today. They also asking exactly the same question. So where do I find that people? What is the definition of that new talent, and including the leadership talent, which I should look for, as I'm hiring, for these, extremely important roles. And it also supports a lot by recruiters. They're also kind of in between here, and they used to provide that bridge and that cover and that search. And they also kind of, a little bit now in the middle of nowhere in terms of like, okay, how do I shape that talent? How do I get that talent? How do I connect, these needs and what on the market? So what we did from Data Masterclass perspective is that we stepped in very heavily into this. And so we created the program, the new program, which is our new product as well. It's called Agentic AI Leader, and it's a 12 weeks program where we going through many what you just listed earlier today. So starting from what's your strategy? How do you get that strategy across an enterprise as a combination of the big bets, as a combination of your foundational investments, as organizational changes which needs to happen in the organization, and on so on and so on. And so we specifically created that kind of program where we take module by module and we go through each of these mentioned challenges and we unpack them. We make it then also very practical. So we will have people actually coding, and creating a product which is absolutely repurposable in their own business environment. So it's not a theory, where you just show some slides and so on.
As you have to pull up your
Exactly.
sleeves and try it out.
Exactly. And that's the whole point, to get leaders through that, on one side, an experience which shifts towards where technology is today and gives them that first hand and that exact feel of how they should start to think of, or continue to think if they're already on that path, but going deeper. And then the other time also give more clarity, like what are the things which works really? Because we observe a lot of things in the market. We have also our great coaches coming from real enterprises today, from really great companies, like Thoughtworks, HelloFresh in Germany. And so the companies which leading today the path of that agentic use case. So we want to be sure that this is exactly the program which is built for leaders who wants to grow, who wants to evolve significantly. And we're just launching the first cohort of this program on July 1st. And then we will regularly, have next cohorts on this. But the whole idea was to create that scalable program which is accessible anywhere. So it's not bound to physical location. It's, could be connecting from anywhere in the world, and create that very hands-on, very practical way for people to address that challenge. And also, important thing in our world is to get that certification. Something which confirms truly that they made that change, right? Which signals to the external world, I did it. I went for this. There is a now new understanding of how should the things go in the future with agents and with that world which shapes around us with technology. So that's what we have as an offer.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for summarizing this offer. Of course, as we mentioned, this whole JoyData Podcast and the JoyData Leaders community and the Data Masterclass, they have the vision to educate the data leaders. So I hope you get some very interesting tips and ideas how to kind of create your own visions within your own teams and kind of leverage the available communities and the ideas and potentially programs how to improve. So thank you very much, Aleksejs, for being part of this podcast, and thank you very much, all of you, for listening.
Thank you for having me here.